studying your last two. I swim med when turned in. The styren down to mute. And can learn the pole that sunk he died.
So far, we've examined a situation where Amco received eligible dividends from another corporation, resulting in the creation of an ERDTOH balance. But now let's explore an important what-if scenario. What if the dividends received by Amco were non-eligible dividends instead? Would everything change? Would the corporation now automatically create NERDTOH? And would the refund rules be completely different? These are exactly the questions Frank and Enzo are asking in this slide. At first glance, it seems logical to assume that if a corporation receives a non-eligible dividend, then the resulting refundable tax account must be NERDTOH. After all, the name itself contains the words non-eligible. This assumption is extremely common among students and even among new tax practitioners. In fact, it's one of the most common misconceptions when learning the ERDTOH and NERDTOH system. That's why the slide presents the myth on the left side. The myth says, a non-eligible dividend is received. Therefore, the refundable tax account must be NERDTOH. But that conclusion is not always correct. The reality is shown on the right side of the slide. To determine which refund rules apply, we cannot simply look at the type of dividend received. Instead, we must identify the actual refundable tax account that is created. In other words, the critical question is not, what dividend was received? The critical question is, which refund account does the tax end up in? This distinction may seem small, but it is one of the most important conceptual ideas in the entire dividend refund system. Many students focus on the source of the income. Tax professionals focus on the refund account, because once the tax enters a particular refund account, the rules of that account control how refunds are recovered. That's why Frank and Enzo are shown looking at two possible vaults. Will the tax end up in NERDTOH? Will it end up in ERDTOH? The answer determines the future dividend planning strategy. And that answer is far more important than simply knowing whether the original dividend received was eligible or non-eligible. The key takeaway from this slide is simple. Receiving a non-eligible dividend does not automatically mean that NERDTOH will result. Before jumping to conclusions, we must identify the actual refundable tax account created by the transaction. Only then can we determine which refund rules apply. In the next slide, we'll uncover the real answer and see why the refund account, not the dividend received, is the factor that ultimately controls the tax planning outcome. In the previous slide, we asked an important question. What happens if Amco receives a non-eligible dividend instead of an eligible dividend? Many students immediately assume that the answer must be NERDTOH. After all, the dividend received was non-eligible. So shouldn't the refundable tax account automatically become non-eligible refundable dividend tax on hand? The answer is not necessarily. And understanding why is one of the most important conceptual breakthroughs in learning the ERDTOH and NERDTOH system. Let's walk through the flow shown at the top of the slide. Amco receives a non-eligible dividend of $42,600. Part 4 tax applies to that dividend. The corporation pays refundable tax. But notice what happens next. The tax is recorded in ERDTOH, not NERDTOH. The result is an ERDTOH balance of $16,330. This is where many students get confused. They focus on the type of dividend received, but tax professionals focus on something entirely different. They focus on where the refundable tax is recorded. The student on the left side of the slide is making the classic mistake. He sees a non-eligible dividend and immediately asks, shouldn't this create NERDTOH? The tax advisor on the right responds, not necessarily. because the dividend received does not automatically determine which refund account applies. Instead, we must follow the tax through the system and identify the account where the refundable tax balance ultimately resides. The flow diagram in the center illustrates the proper way to think about the problem. Step 1. A dividend is received. Step 2. Part 4 tax applies. Step 3. A refundable tax account is created. Step 4. The refund rules follow the account that was created. And that's the key insight. Once the refundable tax is sitting inside ERDTOH, the ERDTOH rules control future refunds. The original dividend received no longer determines the refund mechanics. The account determines the refund mechanics. That's why the warning box on the right highlights a very common student mistake. Many people look only at the dividend received. But the correct approach is to identify the refund account, because that account dictates which dividend strategies can be used later to recover the refundable tax. The comparison box at the bottom summarizes the lesson perfectly. The wrong question is, what dividend was received? The right question is, which refund account was created? That single shift in thinking transforms how you analyze ERDTOH and NERDTOH questions. The key takeaway from this slide is simple. The account controls the rules. Whenever the refundable tax balance sits in ERDTOH, the ERDTOH refund rules apply. It doesn't matter whether the original dividend received was eligible or non-eligible. What matters is the refund account, where the tax ultimately ends up. In the next slide, we'll apply this idea to its logical conclusion and see the ultimate ERDTOH rule. Once a balance is in ERDTOH, the refund can generally be triggered by either eligible dividends or non-eligible dividends. And that's what makes ERDTOH such a powerful and flexible planning tool. We've now reached one of the most important concepts in the entire ERDTOH and NERDTOH system. If you remember only one rule from this section, make it this one. Once a refundable tax balance sits in ERDTOH, the refund can be triggered by other type of dividend. That's what makes ERDTOH so powerful. At the center of the slide, Amco has an ERDTOH balance of $16,330. Think of this ERDTOH account as a vault containing refundable taxes that the corporation would like to recover. The question is, how can Amco unlock that refund? The answer is illustrated by the two roads leading to the same destination. The first road is the eligible dividend route. Amco pays an eligible dividend. The ERDTOH refund is triggered. The corporation receives its refund. The second road is the non-eligible dividend route. Amco pays a non-eligible dividend. The ERDTOH refund is triggered again. The corporation still receives its refund. Notice what happened. Both roads lead to exactly the same outcome. The refund is recovered regardless of which dividend type is used. And that is the defining feature of ERDTOH. Unlike NERDTOH, ERDTOH does not force the corporation into a single dividend strategy. Instead, it provides flexibility. That's why the tax advisor on the right side of the slide is holding the master key. ERDTOH gives planners more choices. More choices mean more opportunities to minimize tax and improve overall results. The comparison table at the bottom reinforces this distinction. For NERDTOH, there is only one door. A non-eligible dividend triggers a refund. An eligible dividend does not. The corporation has no alternative path. But for ERDTOH, there are two doors. An eligible dividend works. A non-eligible dividend also works. Either route can unlock the refund. That's why the memory trick shown on the slide is so useful. Think of NERDTOH as a building with one door. Only one entrance gets you inside. Now think of ERDTOH as a building with two doors. You can enter through either one and still reach the same destination. This simple mental image helps explain why tax professionals describe NERDTOH as restrictive and ERDTOH as flexible. And flexibility has real value. Because when a corporation has flexibility, it can choose the dividend strategy that best fits the shareholder's tax situation. Often, that means paying eligible dividends, recovering the refund, and still obtaining the lower personal tax treatment associated with eligible dividends. The result is a better overall tax outcome. The golden rule at the bottom of the slide summarizes the entire lesson. Once a balance is in ERDTOH, the refund can be triggered by either eligible dividends or non-eligible dividends. That is why ERDTOH is considered flexible, and that single rule is the foundation of advanced dividend planning. Whenever you see an ERDTOH balance, don't think about restrictions. Think about options. Because in corporate tax planning, options create opportunities, and opportunities create better tax results.